Okay, now we're working. All right, so I have this up just, I have this up just to already kind of get you settled, figure out where we are, kind of make your plans. So we're getting toward the end of the year because next week is Thanksgiving break. Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to start immune physiology because we only have a few slides left. And let me move this thing out of the way. You don't need that right there. We only have a couple slides left on the kidney physiology, and then I'll post those today. And immune physiology should only take about 2 days. So we're right on schedule, okay? Should I finish immune physiology like early, like Wednesday, which may or may not happen, we could treat Friday as an additional kind of like study group, okay? The exam outline's already been sent out. You received it, right? I emailed it last week because some people asked. I said, well, why not? Okay, but Monday, the lecture exam, muscle physiology, blood physiology, and then cardiovascular physiology. You have the breakdown, so you know. I'm glad that we're having the blood physiology lab today and tomorrow, because then when you have those questions, because I will talk about or ask about blood typing, you'll have done it, and that helps you remember it. Okay, and then we're coming up after that, our last lecture, reproductive physiology. We're starting the second to the last topic today. And then after that, we have one more chapter. All right. Okay. Any questions now? All right. Let me get this out of the way. Okay. There we go. And move this. Okay, so dialysis. Usually done at dialysis clinics, not necessarily in a hospital, unless it's an emergency. But have you ever drove past one of the many dialysis clinics we have in Florence? All right, so this is for people we talked about different ways to evaluate kidney function, and the most recent one was using creatine clearance as an estimation of GFR, glomerular filtration rate. And then I gave you, not to memorize, but a table that kind of showed you kidney function based on that. So once someone's kidneys aren't functioning, you are in a lot of trouble because you can't last a couple of days without your kidneys filtering out all those toxins and helping you retain water without you dehydrate pretty quickly. So to avoid multiple organ system shutdown from all those toxins in your blood, 3 times a week, you have to go through dialysis. I can't show all of it because it's just too complicated, but basically they're taking your blood, arterial blood, all right, coming up. So actually they're doing venous blood, sorry. They're taking your blood out. They're running it through a pump, a dialyzer. It's more complicated than this, but it's going to act as artificial glomeruli. In the nephron, the glomerulus is what filters your arterial blood. And then that filtrate, some of it, most of it gets reclaimed by your body. And then some of it's going to go to waste. It's not a perfect process. All right. It does a pretty good job. And they have to add some things into the filtrate back because some things it won't filter out. And then it goes back into your body. This is not something you can do in 30 minutes. Anyone know someone who goes through kidney dialysis on a regular basis? Is it like a 6-hour process? It's a bit. All right. You're talking, if it's 3 times a week, it's the bulk of an 8-hour day. All right. Okay. So renal replacement therapy, and this is kind of what it looks like. All right. Has anyone actually shadowed and seen this done, or have someone you know? Was it shadowing, or you knew someone?
I did it with my friends because she did it.
Okay, that's cool. Okay. That's impressive. So you got some skills. Okay. And was it a temporary dialysis treatment?
No.
It was long-term, and she was waiting for kidney replacement?
No, she actually passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Wow. So it's real. Someone else raised their hand. All right. Is it about a 5 or 6 hour ordeal? Yeah.
She was waiting on my car and my aunt. They both was waiting on two. It was like real draining, and they would come home real tired.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. Totally, you know. Yeah, and so that's their life. They're getting dialysis treatment done. Yeah. In the veterinary world, cats get kidney problems, kidney failure, and you don't really do dialysis on cats. Well, maybe if you're at a big veterinary clinic in Miami or something like that. But yeah, it's bad. At least humans have the option of dialysis. Okay, so I do have a YouTube video if you're interested, or you have someone in your life, or someone who's going through this. This is a pretty good video that talks about, if I can get this thing out of the way, explaining the more detailed dialysis methods. But I'm not going to do that here because I want to move on to the next chapter. But I always try and have an extra resource if you're interested and say, hey, I'd like to look at that. All right. So anyway, this is just it's called hemodialysis. It's an artificial kidney. It's artificial nephrons. All right. Kind of like when you use the dialysis tube in the osmosis diffusion lab, but much higher quality and better filtration. So like the glomerulus, which is the inside of the snake head, all right, it's that network of capillaries, it has small pores in it. And when arterial blood goes in, small things will come out to get into the PCT, water, salts, glucose, small proteins, small things. Big things like cells and other big things get kicked out. All right. So if it can fit through the size of the pores, it gets into the filtrate. And then what we talked about last time is what is reabsorbed from the PCT, pretty much everything. And then what happens at the descending loop, water gets pulled out, and the ascending loop, salt gets pulled out. And based on how much salt's pulled out at the ascending loop determines how much water's pulled out of the descending loop, and that's concentrating your urine. And then at the DCT, that's the first place in the nephron where hormones can have their effect. So what hormone? I gave you two that can have an effect. So the DCT, which one? Is it the short three-letter acronym that begins with A, or is it the longer word that also begins with A? The longer one, aldosterone. All right. Aldosterone has its effect at the last part of the DCT. It causes you to reclaim salt. That goes back into your bloodstream. What follows the salt back into your bloodstream? Water by osmosis. And that makes your blood volume go up, makes your blood pressure go up. All right. Then at the collecting duct is the last place that hormones can have their effect. And since all this is on the exam next Monday, this is why I'm doing this. Now it's the short three-letter word begins with an A. ADH. Yeah, I know. Okay. ANP, atrial, natriuretic. That's what the A stands for. In ADH, it's antidiuretic. And it was the basis of the kidney lab that we did. Okay. And that hormone is only going to be released if your blood osmolarity is too high. It doesn't care if your blood pressure is too low or too high. So if you get confused with this, make sure and study it up before the exam on Monday, because I'm definitely asking it now that you have the exam breakdown. But anyway, it's dialysis is a last resort. Like your kidneys are so low function, you have to do something to take those toxins out. All right. Unlike the tubules in our nephrons, the artificial membrane can't reabsorb things like sodium, potassium, glucose, and other important things that normally get reabsorbed by the PCT. All right. So it's not perfect. It's by any means, it's not perfect. All right. So they include that fluid around the membrane. So there's no concentration gradient, so you don't lose that stuff. Sometimes a patient's own peritoneal membranes can be used. That's what lines your abdominal cavity, peritoneum, can be used as a dialysis membrane called continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis. Has anyone ever heard of that? I'm less familiar with that, but I was Googling it, and there's two ways of dialysis. It's the typical hemodialysis. That means they're taking out your blood, running through the machine, giving it back to you. This is they're using your peritoneal membrane to act as a filter, and it can do it very well. All right. So two methods. Okay. Last topic. There's so much more I could cover, but you're going to learn a lot of diuretics. Diuretics can be given to treat high blood pressure, can be given for edema, people who have swelling in their limbs and things like that, or fluid around their heart, fluid in their lungs, for whatever reason. You want to get rid of that excess fluid, and diuretics can do that. So the most common one is this, some of the first design, Lasix, known as furosemide. I guess this is the product name. This is the active ingredient. You'll learn all about that in pharm. Okay, but let's start with this group because there's several drugs. I gave you one example, all right? The common ones. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, acetozolamide, all right? Then there's loop diuretics, which is Lasix, the product name. And then thiazides, like hydrochlorothiazides. Now, it's convenient that it works out this way. I didn't plan it this way, but they act on the nephron at different places. And it goes with alphabet. C comes first in the alphabet. Loop, L comes mid alphabet. Thiazides towards the end. Think of it as the parts of the nephron. So carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Oops, change my pen color. Act at the PCT, the first part of the nephron that receives the filtrate from the glomerulus. Loop diuretics act at the loop. Not very creative there, but they're acting only at the ascending loop. Okay, I'll explain that in a second. Well, actually, maybe you can tell me. All these diuretics act the same way, and I'll just complete it for parallel construction. Thiazides act at the DCT, which is the last part of the nephron. All right, so you can, C comes before any of the others. That's the PCT comes before any other part of the nephron. Loops is kind of midway. And then thiazide, T comes later in the alphabet. Think the DCT comes later in the nephron. They all work the same way. They block salt reabsorption. If you can control where salt goes or doesn't go, you're controlling where water goes or doesn't go. All right. So they all decrease salt reabsorption. All right. Decrease salt reabsorption. Decrease salt reabsorption. If you're not reabsorbing it, where's the salt going? Okay, reabsorption. Let's get this clear. Reabsorption. And I like to think of it as another R word, retention. If you're retaining something, are you losing it? No. All right. Goes back into bloodstream. All right. If you block or decrease reabsorption, it's not going back into your bloodstream. Where's it going? You're peeing it out. Okay. So as long as you understand the difference between reabsorption and blocking reabsorption, you're holding on to it. You're retaining it. It goes back into the bloodstream. Diuretics prevent this. They block salt reabsorption. So the salt goes out in your urine, right? Pee it out, the salt. Water follows. Out in urine. Okay. So if you're peeing out that water, if it was prescribed to you for blood pressure control, your blood volume goes down. Come on, Ben. And if your blood volume goes down because you're peeing out body water, blood pressure decreases. All right. Yes.
This also reduce like swelling.
Yes, edema. Edema is swelling. So people who have poor cardiovascular capacity, their heart's not working as it should, they can often develop edema in their legs and feet because they're not getting good venous return. All right, so their cardiac output is bad. I'm going over chapter 8 stuff. All right. They could have fluid collecting around their heart. Sometimes that can happen. Sometimes people can have fluid in their lungs for one reason or another. And if you give them a diuretic, they'll pee out excess body water and it can help take that edema away. All right, because you're getting rid of excess fluid, even the stuff that's collected with gravity in your lower extremities. So diuretics can be used for a couple of reasons and more reasons than that. But high blood pressure, bring it down by pee out your body water, or get rid of fluid that's been retained in your body. All right. And you'll learn there's off-label uses of it as well. Okay, so do not memorize something like this. But basically the PCT right here, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors work here. All right. So they're blocking this, which blocks this. Salt goes out, water goes out. The loop diuretics furosemide, Lasix, work in the ascending loop, right? So if you don't pass salt out here, you won't pull water out here and retain it. It all goes out. If you're using thiazides, oh, sorry about this. It's always in the wrong place. There we go. Okay, if you're taking thiazides, it's going to be working here in the DCT. Okay, and I'm not going to go over it, but I've got extra reading after this if you're curious, because you're going to learn in farm, and I want to get on to the next topic. But notice they have potassium sparing diuretics, because you could possibly lose potassium. It's complicated. I don't want to get into it. I want to move on to another topic, but you'll learn about it in farm. There's going to be a case when you prescribe a certain type of diuretic to one person and something else to someone else. There's always contraindications. All right. So if you want to read more about it, all right, I've got 3 or 4 pages here about diuretics, what they're doing, including, I don't know why this is still here. If I could get that out of the way, I would. About losing potassium in the urine. And if someone is doing that, if you lose potassium, your heart rate can skyrocket. All right. And that could put stress on your body, because you're losing potassium, the ion that's supposed to let your heart relax. So without getting into it, you can become hypokalemic. And then there's some more information, but just, I'm not covering it. It's just there if you want it. All right. Consider, just know the 3 groups and where they act and how they act. Block salt retention, so you pee it out, which makes you pee out water. All right. So that will end this chapter. Any questions? Okay. So here we are. Let's save that. Okay. I don't know why it's doing this. On top of the green. On this.
It's in the middle of that on top.
Oh, thank you. Ah, you saved my day. Okay. I only do the Zoom just in case people can't be here. I know someone's sick and can't be here, so that's no fault of their own. Okay, how many people covered immune stuff in anatomy? Like where the immune organs are located, maybe a little bit about the lymphatic system. All right. Okay, I'm always surprised at that. But in microbiology, if you had Dr. Pryor and Dr. Lyles, did they cover some immune cells? Okay, that's good. I'll touch on some of those things, but I'll mostly keep it physiological. I do have 2 flow diagrams for this chapter. They're on the syllabus with this chapter, okay? And I mentioned it in the PowerPoint, but if you want to study the immune system, those 2 flow diagrams, all right, is the way to do it. So I have to say review immune organs, because I always hope that you've covered it in anatomy, but kind of disappointed there. And then we'll talk about how the immune system is divided into innate versus adaptive. Does anyone who's covered anything about immune physiology, especially since COVID and all this stuff, and you might have learned some things by Googling, and why do we need to have a vaccine 3 weeks after the first? And anyone know the difference between innate versus adaptive immunity, just to kind of see where it falls out?
Innate is what you already have.
Yes, innate is what you already have. That makes adaptive what you don't have, but your body makes. When you got those vaccines for whatever, for tuberculosis, or that's really a skin test, for tetanus, which you have to have tetanus to be a student here, and then COVID vaccines, flu vaccines, I just got mine, and whatever, shingles vaccine, okay? Assuming your body's never been exposed to that particular virus, and the flu changes every year, and we're seeing how COVID can change multiple times within a year, it seems, all right? So assuming you've not been exposed to this new strain, you get a vaccine and your immune system comes up with adaptive immunity, and 3 weeks later, you start producing antibodies, all right? And then if you hit yourself with a booster, you really upgrade those antibodies, okay? And I have a slide that tries to explain that for you, all right? Innate doesn't involve antibodies. Your body, you're born with it, okay? So I like to explain it this way. If it takes 3 weeks, 2 weeks bare minimum, 3 weeks to make antibodies to something you've never been exposed to before, what protects you in those 3 weeks? Because you could die. Innate immunity, and it's actually the more complex part of your immune system. It's pretty amazing. All right. Okay, and then we'll talk about T cells and B cells and the difference. And then natural versus artificial, and we'll just cover some autoimmune disorders, especially ones that I've covered in class this semester. Okay, all right. So review. If you didn't have it, it's okay. Your tonsils and adenoids, you look, open your mouth and look back there, the dangling thing. That's supposed to play an immune function. You can have your tonsils removed and you still be fine. It's supposed to be a first line of defense for inhaled pathogens. All right. But we also have in our lungs, I don't know if you remember, I think, no, I didn't mention that in the respiratory system. We have little macrophage cells in our alveoli. And macrophage cells, macro means big, phage means to eat. Taken together, it means, all right, big eater immune cells that if you inhale something that's foreign, irritating, or a virus or a bacteria, these cells will consume it and destroy it. All right. Okay. So you can live without your tonsils because your immune system already has a little bit of protection. Your thymus, which is located basically near the heart. We'll talk about that. Lymph nodes throughout your body. Okay. As a nurse, you're going to learn to be able to palpate, all right, cervical lymph nodes, axillary lymph nodes, groin lymph nodes, all over the body. And if they're swollen, it means that person's fighting something. All right. And in anatomy, did you just use models to study the digestive system, or did any of you lucky people get to look at one of the cats? Okay, did you look through the small intestine, pull it out and look at the mesentery, which holds the loop of the intestine together? Did you happen to see any Peyer's patches, which are immune cells in the mesentery? It's studded all over the place with basically lymph nodes. Think about digestion. You're consuming the environment, and then in your intestines, you're trying to extract all the goodies and then get rid of the waste. What happens if you ingest a pathogen? There's lymph nodes all throughout the mesentery of the intestine and it's supposed to catch those things. Okay, that's what's nice about looking at an actual dissection specimen. And then our appendix, which is basically at the bottom part of the cecum, which is the first part of our large intestine. All right. You can live without an appendix. And sometimes in some people, because of gravity, because it's hanging down, it can trap bad bacteria or other things that you've consumed and get inflamed, get swollen, threaten to rupture, threaten your life. All right. And you get your appendix removed. You know what's really protecting you in your intestines besides these lymph nodes called Peyer's patches? In your gut, you actually have, especially your large intestine, you have so many natural bacteria that normally live there. It's called normal flora. All right. And that normal bacteria that outcompete the bad bacteria like E. coli or other things, all right, or Helicobacter pylori, which causes ulcers. It's the good bacteria outnumbering the bad. So you're going to find out in medicine, and they're already starting to and appreciate how a healthy gut flora is actually better for your health overall than even the things that you eat. All right. So you've heard about probiotics and everything like that. All right. That's meant to help those bacteria flourish. So how many people knew that it was good bacteria that outnumbered the bad bacteria? Okay. People who go on antibiotics can have digestive upset because the antibiotics go after the bad bacteria, but they can also harm the good bacteria and cause problems. Okay, your bone marrow, of course, produces white blood cells. Your spleen, which is a filtering organ, sometimes with exposure to certain viruses, your spleen can become super active and enlarge. All right, like the monovirus can make your spleen enlarge. The Peyer patches are in your intestines. And so those are the main ones, right? And that's where they're located. So going kind of one at a time. It's subdivided into primary lymph organs, I guess, with the most importance, but I wouldn't say that. Your bone marrow, okay? Why does it change my pen color? Produces blood cells. So we talked about that in chapter 7. Since this is immune function, I'll put here just white blood cells, but it also produces your red blood cells and your platelets. But let's just focus on the white blood cells. That is part of your immune system. All right. Your thymus is where T cells mature. And since I haven't covered that yet, that will make no sense, but we'll come back to it. Okay, your lymph nodes, if you covered this in anatomy, well, where white blood cells, it's an S, mature, other than also the bone marrow itself. Because a lot of these white blood cells mature in your bone marrow before the bone marrow kicks them out. Sometimes they continue maturation in the lymph nodes, or in this case, the T cells in the thymus. I don't know enough about immune physiology. It's not my jam. All right, I know a little bit, but not a lot. I don't know why they mature someplace other than the bone marrow. Now, lymphatic and blood vessels carry immune cells. And I'll say immune cells, not just white blood cells, because you're going to find out when I go over innate immunity how many other immune cells you have. All right, mast cells, which are basophils, natural killer cells, complement proteins, all these things. Tonsils, I'll put here first line of defense from inhaled pathogens. Okay, we covered this a while ago, but your brain has glial cells that function as the brain's cleanup crew. Anyone remember what those are called? Probably not. I'll start spelling it out. It's okay. Microglia. All right. Phagocytic cells, the big eater cells, that destroy pathogens. Okay. Your spleen filters your blood, much like your liver does. Your intestines have Peyer's patches, which are basically lymph nodes. And now that I have to move this thing, it's always in the way. There we go, up there. Your appendix is at the bottom of, come on, pen. Bottom of your cecum. To, I guess, say, catch pathogens. But its role is minuscule compared to the good bacteria that are in your intestines. And the liver has Kupffer cells. I'll say Kupffer immune cells to destroy pathogens. Now, once I finish writing that, I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, so there's specialized cells like the Peyer's patches, like the microglia, like the Kupffer cells, and it might just be one R. And two P's, I have to look. Why is it very, very important for your liver to have phagocytic cells that can destroy pathogens? And it has to do with what the liver does for your body. Pathogens. It gets rid of toxins. It's your body's major filtering organ. Okay. So, and it's located, you know, like right here, and the stomach's over here, and the intestines lie someplace below. And the liver is connected to the duodenum with a duct and everything like that, so bile can get through. So it's kind of connected. It's interconnected to your digestive system. Let's say you consume something and you eat it and it goes through your digestive system, and let's say it makes it past the stomach with the stomach acid. Let's say it makes it into the duodenum of the small intestine. The liver has its own, and then once you break down all those nutrients in your small intestine, it gets reabsorbed across the membrane of your small intestine into your bloodstream. Now, what happens if a pathogen came over into your bloodstream? The blood that is taking nutrients from your intestines doesn't just go back into the venous system and go to the heart, all right? Because it could be carrying pathogens. That venous blood from your digestive tract that's picking up all these nutrients passes through your liver before it goes back to your heart. The liver is going to filter out any toxins, and those Kupffer cells are going to catch pathogens And then that blood passing through the liver, the hepatic portal system, is now clean. And then it goes back into the venous system to the heart, because you wouldn't want those things to affect the heart. No one covered this in anatomy?
Yeah.
You did. Awesome. Who did you have?
No, we talking about it now.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Cool. Who's doing it?
Dr. B.
Oh, I'm gonna have to. I was like, yes, thank you. Thank you, because that's really important. Okay, very important. Very important part of your immune function. Okay, so I'm going to break it down, the innate versus the adaptive. So this is always in the way, so let me move it up. Can I move it up? Yes. Okay, there's external innate and then there's internal innate. Okay, when COVID came out, what were the protection protocols?
6 feet.
6 feet, wear a mask, wash your hands frequently. Okay. I mean, I used to go into a store and bring pieces of paper towel so that when you put your card into the card reader to pay for whatever your purchase is, I don't want to touch those keys because everyone touches those keys. I take out a piece of paper and I touch it with that. Okay. And then throw the paper out. I mean, okay. Your skin, where things can get into your body. So external innate is the barriers. Come on, Ben, is the barriers to pathogen entry. And so the reason we wore a mask is to protect our respiratory system from that coming in. And if you've ever done a micro lab, it's really cool. I've seen pictures on TikTok and Facebook and all that of someone sneezing on a Petri plate and looking at what grows, someone sneezing through a mask on a Petri plate, and you can see a big difference in the bacteria that proliferate, right? Barrier. Wash your hands a lot. Your skin is a great entry point for pathogens. So as nurses, please wash your hands and then get lotion because that's going to dry your hands out. But all these barriers are important. Okay, we'll talk more about them. Innate immunity is immune protection once a pathogen gets in. I'll say after a pathogen enters body. Okay, so the reason I've got this guy here fending off the virus particles, because that's what they are, is your barriers. Your skin is your biggest barrier, but every place that something could enter your body, there is an innate barrier that protects you. Once it gets in, your white blood cells will come to the rescue. So this kid's got a thermometer in his mouth, which indicates he has a fever. So in micro, I know Dr. Pryor covers it, a modest elevated body temperature, like even as much as 102 is actually okay. All right. Don't rush. You got a parent, don't rush your kid to the hospital, you know, for a mild temperature. Your body does that. Remember, your hypothalamus has a set point for body temperature, the anterior nucleus. When you have a fever, it happens because your hypothalamus has been reset. All right. Your immune system signals the hypothalamus to elevate the set point so your body temperature can rise. Why is that important? An elevated, what purpose could it serve? To kill off the bacteria, because the bacteria can't survive at that elevated temperature. So a mild fever is okay, especially if it's a bacterial infection, because it'll kill that off. If it's a severe fever, like you're talking 103.5, 104, 105, you gotta get treated for that. All right, that's your body temperature rises too much. And now the proteins in your brain start to break down. So a mild fever. Yes.
So is it true, like, when people get fevers, or colds, and they have like the shivers and stuff, they say sweat it out, like.
Yeah, it's just your body doing its thing by increasing body temperature to kill bacteria as best it can, as long as it's not severe. And, you know, like I've had those reactions to vaccines. I don't know if you've had it, of course, with flu, not so much with colds, but flu, you can cycle in and out of fevers. That's a natural process. It's a natural process. And then, of course, inflammatory reactions, which we'll talk about. Now, adaptive immunity or acquired immunity or humoral immunity, not funny, but just humoral immunity. It's all known as the same thing, okay? The body produces antibodies specific to a pathogen. And really what we're talking about in a pathogen, we're talking about these proteins on their surface called antigens, a pathogen's antigen. And since we're doing the blood typing lab today and tomorrow, you'll understand more about that, okay? An antigen is cell surface protein that a cell recognizes itself as itself. Your body's immune cells can recognize your body's own cells because they carry self-antigens on them, all right? If your immune system detects a cell that's foreign and has an unrecognizable antigen, it's going to mount an immune response, all right? So in the lab today and tomorrow, you're going to be using laboratory-made antibodies to blood antigens, to the A antigen, to the B antigen, okay? And if your blood reacts to those antibodies that are specific to that antigen, the blood cell antigen, then you know you have that antigen in your blood and you know you have that blood type. So that will explain better than me hand waving, okay, about antigens and antibodies, because you'll see it in the lab and you'll see it happens in 1 to 2 minutes. All right. Okay. All right. External innate defense, barriers. So your skin, okay? I mean, I don't even need to write anything. Your skin is the ultimate barrier. If you have cracks or holes or breaks in your skin, that is a good entry point for bacteria, okay? Sweat is antimicrobial. Did anyone ever do a lab in microbiology where you swab some sweat and you put it on an agar plate that had some like E. coli bacteria, and then you look at what's called the zone of inhibition, where the bacteria die? That's what you would see. It's a really cool experiment, okay? Yeah. What? He loves those things. In fact, I just heard him talking to the other microbiology teachers about doing some tests like that, because if people see what their body is producing, I'll get to tears, all right, in a second. All right, since I'm talking about it, eyes, tears are antimicrobial. Think about that. Plus, they're flushing pathogens, and they flush out. Your eyes water when you're exposed to antigens that are irritating to your body. That's an immune response. Not only are the tears antimicrobial, but they're physically flushing your eyes of that pathogen, okay? Stomach acid is antibacterial. If you consume bacteria, which you do, no doubt, lots of it when you eat something, okay? That acid is usually enough to kill that bacteria. Only some really hardy bacteria, like the Helicobacter pylori. Anyone know about that bacteria? It's one that can actually thrive in certain people, and it's the bacteria that's been associated with formation of ulcers. Your respiratory tract, your tonsils have immune function. You have alveolar macrophages. Okay, so a macrophage, break it into its words. Macro means big, and phage means eat. All right, it's big eater immune cells. Do you ever play those retro video games like Pac-Man? And Pac-Man goes along eating the dots. Okay, Pac-Man is a macrophage. It's a big eater, and the dots could be bacteria. Okay. And there's other things which I'm not going to put down, but also in your respiratory tract, you have mucus and those fine hairs. Remember we talked about it, that when you expectorate, right? I'm not really doing it. And then if you're outside, you can spit it out. If you're inside, you just swallow it, and then you go back to stomach acid. All right. Now, the urinary tract, we just finished it. Your urine is acidic, slightly acidic. Acid is antimicrobial. Genital, all right? So I'm going to make this separate. How about this? Vaginal. Is the vagina an acidic environment? Anyone who took microbiology? Yes. All right. Acidic, passages are antimicrobial. Now, just to make Dr. Pryor proud, I know he covers it, I think Dr. Lyles does too. What is the bacteria that normally live in the vagina? They're supposed to be there. They're normal flora that produce that acid. Begins with an L. Lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is a normal bacteria, just like our gut has normal bacteria. And it produces the acid that protects the vagina from bacteria. It's antimicrobial. I don't know if he taught to you in microbiology, but you might see it in your future in healthcare. People who overuse vaginal cleansers, douches, all that stuff, tell them to stop the hell up with that stuff, okay? What you're doing is you're flushing out the good bacteria, and once the good bacteria are out, it makes room for bad bacteria to set up house, all right? And even things like yeast, all right? People who use those products because they don't want to smell, they don't want that smell. That smells normal. The vagina has a normal smell because of the acid that live there. So you're going to have to educate people about that, saying you could disrupt your normal flora, and now you're in for trouble, all right? The other thing that could disrupt this normal flora in the vaginal canal is antibiotics. All right, that could do things too. But good on you for remembering lactobacillus. Awesome. Okay. Now, those are all your berries, and they work really well. Okay, but they're not perfect. So what happens once something gets in? Okay. Well, your white blood cells are phagocytic. Okay. Phagocytic cells consume and destroy pathogens. Okay. And in particular, your neutrophils and your monocytes. Okay. So you remember that from blood physiology, right? Never let monkeys eat banana. The N is for neutrophils. They're the most prevalent white blood cell you have in your bloodstream at any time. Okay. Then lymphocytes, then monkeys. They're kind of mid-range. Okay. They will destroy pathogens in blood. In the blood. And I can't remember what I added after this. So let's see. Oh, yeah. So this is a white blood cell engulfing rod-shaped bacteria. This is endocytosis. Sucks them in. It's got digestive enzymes in these vacuoles, and it destroys the bacteria. All right. That's what your white blood cells do, and they're doing it in your bloodstream. All right. Okay. So that's what it looks like. Endocytosis. Now, white blood cells aren't done there. They're gonna do all kinds of things. They're going to shift your hypothalamus temperature set point. They're going to call for help to other immune cells. All that's going to happen. Your white blood cells secrete endogenous. That means within. Pyrogens. That means fire. Fire within. It will increase your body temp, which is your fever, to kill bacteria. So this is what I was talking about. A mild fever is therapeutic. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And the fever came about because your white blood cells secreted this chemical that changes your hypothalamus set point for body temperature. It elevates, and then hopefully you kill the bacteria. So thus the kid with the thermometer. Oop, I ran over. Cytokines and chemokines. All right, that's what that is. C. Okay, I'll have to make myself a little extra space here. Cytokines and chemokines are chemical cries for help. I like to have the C with the C. Chemical cries for help. That's how your body communicates, is chemistry. All right. So the white blood cells secrete these. Then there's more than just this, but cytokines and chemokines, which are chemical cries for help. Other white blood cells come to the aid. If you have lymphocytes that have already made antibodies to that pathogen, they're going to come calling, and they're going to come running, like the EMS is going to be coming. Wee, wee. They get a call. They get a chemical cry for help, and then they're going to all descend on that site. All right. That's what that is. Okay. So this is what cytokine cascade kind of looks like. This could be a white blood cell, it could be a mast cell, it's an immune cell. And that is all the call to the body's immune EMS to come to the site and bring all their tools for fighting. I know that when I cover the immune system, it's going to look a lot like cartoonish characters, but in my mind, it always is kind of like that. So I kind of use that because you can't really envision microscopic things happening. So this helps me understand it a little bit better. Okay. Your white blood cells do a whole lot. Natural killer cells, NK cells. They secrete interferon. Does anyone hear that word interferon and associate it with something? Especially like a treatment for a particularly bad viral disease? Anyone? HIV? Treated with they're coming up with so many good HIV treatments and even things that can block you from forming it. But classically, interferons is a chemical that kills viruses. The classic AIDS treatment, and it still exists today, is a chemical cocktail of interferons that are supposed to try and kill that virus in your body before it replicates to a point that it hamstrings your immune system. All right. Toxic granules, that's kind of a very vague thing, will destroy tumor cells. Tumor cells are, I'll just say, abnormal cells. Tumor cells are not necessarily cancerous, but they could become cancerous if left untreated. It's just cells that are dividing abnormally, and they will carry an antigen on their surface that the body recognizes this is not normal growth, and it's going to secrete these toxic granules to stop tumor cells before they become cancerous. All right. We have lots of these systems in our body that are tumor suppressors, and that's definitely one of them. Okay. So what we've got here, I can't remember if this is the interferon or is this the toxic granules. It's just a killer cell. All right. So we don't know whether it's secreting the interferon or whether it's toxic granules, but it's going to kill a virus or abnormal cells that are tumor cells. And so this is where the cartoonish part of the PowerPoint starts. Okay. Oh, here's the virus infected cell, and here's a natural killer cell, which is going after it, secreting all kinds of interferons to help destroy that. How do viruses work in your body? We're the era of COVID. You're going into healthcare. It's important to kind of know. You're close to it. This is how viruses evade our immune system, is they'll have antigens on their surface, like the HIV virus, which is mutated, so that your immune system doesn't detect it. So your antibodies don't detect it. And then it can lay in your body for a while and replicate. So you're onto that. How does a virus lie in your body and hang out there until like things like HIV goes to AIDS? All right. So how do viruses replicate? Are viruses alive themselves? No, because they can't reproduce themselves. They don't have the machinery. They're only alive in host cells. Viruses hijack your cells and force its DNA mechanism to replicate virus cells, virions. And when that cell becomes jam-packed with little baby viruses, it'll explode. All right. And now all those virus particles go and search out for a new cell and do the same darn thing. All right. And eventually, basically, especially your immune cells become handicapped, right? Your T cells specifically. So since we're out of time, I thought I'd ask that because that's important. Viruses need your cells to replicate themselves. All right, so we'll pick up more of this on Wednesday.